There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and another episode of Zooming In, which is a relatively new occasional series on my channel where I chat with bookish social media luminaries the world over to talk about a recent article that's been published online. And oh my God, am I ever excited and honored to have Tina Kover back on my channel, the eminent literary translator. And who better to chat about the recent passing of the doyenne, the diva of literary translators, Edith Grossman, who died just a couple of weeks ago at the age of 87. So, first of all, Tina, welcome back.
Thank you very much. It's been too long.
I've never done an episode of this series where we're bouncing off an obituary, but it's very fitting to do so with you. So, as a literary translator and as a female literary translator, why don't you just take it away? We've both read the New York Times obituary, which I was quite fascinated to hear that she gave an interview to the New York Times for her own obituary. That's fascinating. But it's a very comprehensive obituary, and you and I have read other stuff about her since her passing. So why don't you take it away and tell us what spoke to you the most from that?
First of all, it's obvious that we've really lost a giant of the literary translation world. And my first thought after each of these obituaries that I've read and each of these articles is that I really feel like I missed out on something by never having met her, because she clearly, in addition to the incredible impact that she's had on literary translation, just made a deep personal impact on a lot of people and a lot of people in the literary translation world. And the tributes to her have just been absolutely amazing. It's really gratifying to see somebody being lionized like that, especially a woman, and not just a woman, but a translator, because again, we've said, I think before, when you and I have talked, and maybe other people have said it too, traditionally the translator is kind of encouraged or expected to stay in the shadows a bit and stay in the background. And she did the opposite. She was just this booming voice for literary translation and made real change in the way the profession is viewed and the way translators are viewed. And I'm really also happy that she got as much attention as she did before she passed. While she was still alive, she was the recipient of many tributes, some of which we'll talk about, that she received on her 80th birthday. And so, yeah, I mean, very, really sorry that she's gone, but just feel so thankful that we got to have her while we did.
And she translated so many giants. So she was Marquez's primary translator, Garcia Gabriel Marquez's translator, and
Yeah,
Cervantes, Don Quixote,
yeah, yeah.
and so many others. A lot of poetry that hadn't been translated into English for a century. What did Marquez say about her? He said, I think I can quote it almost exactly. You are my voice in English.
That's what he said. And I mean, that's the ultimate compliment.
The
That's what
ultimate
we all
compliment.
strive for. And to hear it from the author himself, the poet himself, I mean, how amazing.
And I didn't know this until I read the obituary. She was the one that got the whole movement started for having the translator's name on the cover.
Right. And that's what I meant when I said that we owe her such a debt for being this trailblazer, that she really changed the sphere of literary translation in very tangible, very important ways. Because a lot of this really started in 2010 and a little before. A lot of her, sort of biggest strides, I would say, in advancing the visibility of literary translation. And then if you think about how much has happened in the sort of 10, 15 years since she did what she did for the first time, it's hard not to conclude that so much of it is directly due to her. And that's huge.
She also railed against the fact that so little was being translated. And so I think maybe that also was at least in part responsible for so much more coming out in translation. She accused publishers of linguistic isolationism.
which I love. Love that. We can definitely still accuse a lot of them of it, or at least not being as inclusive as they should. But it's just such a great way to put it.
Her reaction when she was approached to, would you be interested in translating Garcia Marquez? Her answer, are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
She sounded like such a character. I wish I had a chance to party with her. She loved her red wine and talking all
Yeah,
into the night about this, that, and the other thing.
absolutely. I mean, I've heard tales from people like Daniel Hahn, who's maybe he's an amazing literary translator. I'm sure you know the name, everybody will, but he's like also one of our great sort of current champions of the next generation. So I love to think of about the two of them elbowing up to the bar, bellying up to the bar is what I meant to say. I like to think of what that conversation must have been like. I'll have to ask him one of these days.
I haven't made time to check yet, but I will do that. Check to look for videos of interviews with her and just to get a sense of what she was like. Now, Daniel Hahn, is he one of the ones featured in this list of tributes on her 80th birthday on the Center for Fiction website? Was he on there?
He's not on there.
He's not on there. Okay.
I did look for him, but there are other people whose names I'm familiar with. I mean, Gregory Rabassa is such a well-known translator. Esther Allen is somebody else who's a major figure in literary translation. And yeah, just to hear people kind of being so unrestrained in their praise, very touching.
It was Gregory Rabassa that I was thinking of. His tribute was wonderful because he said, I was most pleased, blah, blah, blah. And at the very end, he said, please accept my forgiveness for carping about your transmogrification of mutton into lamb. So apparently he had criticized one little word or something, and he's retracting that.
Yeah, was that or potentially that maybe he felt like she had um the language a little bit too much,
Okay.
and then reconsider that opinion later. That's always going to be whenever you're translating some classic work of literature like that. It's such a fine line to tread.
How much to modernize the language or to make it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the line between fidelity and accessibility to a modern readership. It's just probably the hardest, one of the hardest things I think that we face as translators. But the other side of that is also that every translator puts their own personal stamp on what they translate. And clearly, Edith had a very distinctive voice that she felt perfectly able to express and sing out in and translate in, and that really became an important part of the work. It's kind of her signature, I think, is the sort of the humor and the modernity.
She was born in 1936, and when she went into graduate school, the male professor, said, "You're taking the place of somebody who could, and you're just going to get married and quit."
Yeah.
She said, "You have no way of knowing what I'm going to do." And boy, did she show him.
Well, how amazing is that? I know. And I mean, so the fact that she entered academia at such a time when socially, culturally, it was the dark ages for women still at that time, and to have sort of presided over so much change and overseen it and been part of that wave, and then to continue creating and upholding revolution in the industry as late as 5-10 years ago. That's absolutely incredible. I mean, to have a long lasting impact like that, that's a broad arc of influence.
And to wield that influence, one of the things that I was most fascinated to learn about her was that at least in the last 30 years of her life, she never went outside the neighborhood in New York City where she lived. She never traveled, but she kept in touch with her writers the world over, and she She was an internationalist who stayed very, very close to home.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? And the world was happy to come to her, which I think tells you a lot about the kind of magnetic personality she must have been. And again, I'm only sorry that I never knew her myself, but I, can certainly appreciate from a distance how amazing she was. I think the other thing that says though about her, and actually really about literary translation itself, is how crucial it is, translated literature in bringing the world to readers rather than, the opposite.
That's right.
Just
Absolutely.
mhm.
Well, she's the one pioneering translator, pioneering female translator, and you represent you're at the vanguard of the next generation or the generation after that of preeminent literary translators. What is the agenda? What's on the list of things that your generation of translators would like to fight for and change? What's the status quo that needs to be shaken up next?
Well, I mean, really, we're still fighting the same battles. We're still fighting for recognition, greater visibility, translators being named on the covers of books, various things like that. The other big thing is always fighting to get more world literature translated, to keep increasing, that famous 3% figure. Just in case anybody doesn't know what that is, this was a number that came out. I'm not even sure the first time it was mentioned. This feels like it's got to be 20 years ago, or maybe even longer, where it's 3% of, the world's literature in any given year or whatever sort of gets translated into English. And we're always working to make that a higher number. And I do think the number is higher now, the percentage is higher, but it's not high enough. They really are kind of the same causes, I think, that we all feel so passionate about. We're just continuing the fight.
Is there anything else that you would like to mention from any of the reading or anything else you'd like to say about this before we wrap up?
I think really just that I'm feeling, I think, the full impact of her presence, in the industry, realizing that some of the things that I have even occasionally taken for granted over my career wouldn't have been possible without her. Really thankful that we had somebody like that to grace the sphere of literary translation, and for as long as we did. She had a rich life, she had a full life, she lived to a good old age, and I'm happy about that too. So yeah.
Well, I hope to live long enough to pay similar tributes to you on your 80th birthday, but that's 50 years off into the future, so I'm not sure I'll still be here. But
Sure it is. Yeah, we'll go with that.
I couldn't think of anybody I wanted to talk about Edith Grossman's passing more than with you, Tina. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shawn.